This is the Nash Villager Podcast. It's July 7th, 2026. On this day in 1456, a Catholic inquiry concluded, declaring that a previous church trial had made the wrong call. This time, the clerics decided Joan of Arc had not been guilty of heresy. It opened the door to her eventual canonization as a saint centuries later. But it was too late for Joan, who was famously burned at the stake for those charges in 1431. I'm Nina Cardona, and this is your daily digest of what's happening around Middle Tennessee with context and backstory from Nashville Public Radio, WPLN News. It's not often that we go back to the closed legal cases of defendants already in the grave to decide if the courts got it right. Certainly not in an official capacity. But sometimes efforts are made to revisit cases while there's still a chance that any mistakes could be reversed. You know, the people in prison right now who've been there the longest were convicted and sentenced before DNA evidence was a real possibility. It wasn't legally admissible in the United States before 1986, and even then it was in infancy. The Human Genome Project, the international effort to decode and make sense of DNA, didn't get underway until 1990. And that work took more than a decade to finish. And even once it was available as an option, it took a little while for some investigators and attorneys to start using DNA evidence in a serious way. So folks who were found guilty of crimes in Tennessee in the 70s or 80s, or to some extent even on through the 90s and early 2000s, were often convicted on evidence that isn't quite so ironclad, like blood type or witness testimony, which is how you get a case like that of Clark McMillan. In 1980, McMillan, who is a black man, was convicted of accosting a white teenage girl and her boyfriend in a Memphis park. The pair had been attacked at knife point, made to strip and lay face down. The boyfriend was robbed. The girl was raped. There's quite a bit of physical evidence of the rape, but this was before DNA, so that evidence mostly just corroborated the nature of the crime, nothing more. The victims gave what description they could of their assailant, then were shown pictures of people and eventually asked to pick him out from a lineup of suspects. Only the girl chose McMillan during the investigation. He had an alibi, and he also had a prominent limp, which did not match the victims' descriptions of their attacker's movement. But still, prosecutors went forward. He was convicted and sentenced to more than a century in prison. All of his appeals were denied. But McMillan knew he didn't do it, and he was not willing to give up. In 1996, after 16 years in prison, he got in touch with an organization called the Innocence Project. They agreed to take on his case, and they got folks in the Shelby County Prosecutor's Office on board to take another look along with them. It took a lot of work over several years, but in 2002, the physical evidence on file was tested for DNA. It showed McMillan could not have been the rapist. He was finally released. Clark McMillan had served more than 2 decades in prison for a crime he didn't commit. But at least he wasn't going to die behind bars. This kind of exoneration doesn't happen that often. McMillan's was the first Tennessee case taken on by the Innocence Project. In the years since, they've shepherded the overturning of just 4 other convictions in this state. Mistakes made by the court system are very thorny things to unravel and set right. Earlier this year, local law firm Bass, Berry & Sims celebrated the release of a man named Daryl Davis after a wrongful conviction. He'd been found guilty of murders a few years ago on the basis of testimony from an unreliable witness. The firm then took Davis on as a pro bono client in conjunction with an organization called Choosing Justice, which was founded by former public defender in Nashville named Don Diener. Together, they managed to convince a judge to grant a new trial, and that time, Davis was found not guilty. His life sentence was overturned. The firm's announcement of that result listed the staff involved in the case, and it shows how much effort it takes to fix a miscarriage of justice. At least 10 legal professionals pitched in to make that retrial happen and carry it across the finish line. And hopefully most of the people serving time really did do the crime they were convicted of. But of those who didn't, how many are able to get access to that amount of help? The most frustrating part of all these stories is the part that can be too far gone to make right. If the person behind bars is not the perpetrator, that means someone else managed to do a horrible thing with no consequences. In just a few minutes, that's going to be really helpful. But how are they faring in the Southeast right now? That's coming up after the newscast.
Nashville Public Radio is always here to keep you informed, whether it's the latest news or music you should check out. Every week, What Where Wednesdays shares the latest happenings taking place right here in Nashville by talking to members of our community, putting on events in your neighborhood and beyond. So tune in to What Were Wednesdays every Wednesday, and you can always find events at WNXP.org/events.
Here's the latest from WPLN News. Today is the last day to register to vote in Tennessee's primary election ahead of the midterms. Congressional districts and voters' precincts have changed since the legislature heeded a call from President Donald Trump to redraw Tennessee's congressional map in favor of Republicans. Nashville and surrounding counties are now in 5 different congressional districts. Early voting in the primaries begins next Friday, with primary election day on August 6th. The winners of those races will be on the ballot for their party in November. Law enforcement agencies involved in the arrest and death of a man in Clarksville have released statements about what happened. On June 29th, 34-year-old Darius Chappell was arrested by Montgomery County deputies with assistance from a Clarksville police officer and canine. A bystander's video circulated online shows officers holding Chappell on the ground as the canine attacked and bit him. 4 days later, Chappell died after being found unresponsive in his cell at Montgomery County Jail. Yesterday, the Clarksville Police Department confirmed the officer is on administrative leave and an internal investigation is underway. The Montgomery County Sheriff's Office also emailed statements to WPLN, saying findings of its investigation into Chappell's death have been turned over to the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation. The department says Chappell was taken to Vanderbilt of Clarksville Hospital after his arrest, before he was booked into jail. They say Chappell was treated and medically cleared at that time. The cause of his death has not yet been determined. The sheriff's statement said Chappell's arrest stemmed from a warrant for a felony parole violation, and he was also charged with resisting arrest and assault on a first responder. The Tennessee chapter of the NAACP has asked for a federal investigation by the FBI into the use of force in Chappell's arrest and his death while in custody. Nashville's Metro Council meeting could be livelier than usual tonight. Multiple proposals to regulate or temporarily block new data centers are open for public feedback. And for the first time, in anticipation of an influx of speakers, the Metro Council is issuing tickets to speak. In recent weeks, data centers have caused a buzz in Nashville. A proposed facility near the zoo has elicited widespread opposition, including a petition signed by more than 500,000 people. Hundreds showed up to a Metro Planning Commission meeting last month to express opposition to the center, as well as voice support of the bills now up for a public hearing at the Metro Council. In a release, the council says it will start giving out tickets at 5 p.m. on the second-floor mezzanine of the historic Metro Courthouse. The city aims to minimize time standing in line. The Nissan plant in Smyrna has a big economic footprint in Tennessee, and one of its earliest products has hit a milestone and is more popular than ever: the Frontier truck. WPLN Seth Thorpe tells us how demand for Nissan's Frontier reflects consumer popularity for certain types of vehicles.
The first Nissan Frontier rolled off the Smyrna assembly line in 1998. Today, the light-duty truck is still popular, with Nissan touting production of the 1 millionth Frontier truck at its Canton, Mississippi plant. Sales increased 24% since last year, according to Victor Taylor, head of supply chain for Nissan North America.
Last year, for Frontier alone, we probably made about 64,000 to about 70,000 vehicles. This year, we plan on making 100,000. And the 100,000 is driven because the sales that are being produced and being sold every month. So the demand is much higher.
This comes as sales of light trucks, like the Frontier, account for 84% of all U.S. passenger vehicle sales, according to TD Economics. It's why Nissan plans to increase production of the Frontier.
I think the growth is unlimited because we've seen the power in localizations and build where you sell. So we're selling in the U.S., we should actually manufacture the product in the U.S.
And for Tennessee, that power contributes to 15% of the economy, according to federal data. It also ranks the state third in the nation for auto manufacturing jobs. Seth Thorpe, WPLN News.
Looks like Ascension is going to buy the only full-service hospital operating in Williamson County. Williamson Health's Board of Trustees voted on the offer yesterday afternoon. Then last night, the Williamson County Commission voted unanimously to approve the deal. The Nashville Business Journal reports Ascension wants to put in $235 million of its own money for things like construction and building maintenance. The hospital has been struggling financially, and it anticipates progressively larger losses over the next few years. Its board had been cagey about whether it's selling so it can stay afloat. The former Franklin youth soccer coach accused of sexual crimes against children has been sentenced to 30 years in prison. Camilo Campos Hurtado was arrested in 2023 after videos were found on his phone showing that he had drugged and raped multiple children. Prosecutors say they found evidence of crimes committed over the course of a decade. Campos Hurtado is an undocumented immigrant. After the prison sentence, officials say he will likely be deported. Black bear cubs orphaned in the wild may soon find a new temporary home at the Appalachian Bear Rescue. WPLN's Caroline Eggers reports it's a 30-year-old wildlife rehabilitation facility near Gatlinburg that just reopened its doors after a lengthy closure.
In late 2024, the Appalachian Bear Rescue stopped taking in bear cubs following a pneumonia outbreak. The Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency euthanized 13 cubs at the facility. The two groups have since set up an agreement with new protocols. And Director Greg Greco says the Bear Rescue raised about $1 million from supporters to expand its wildlife enclosures.
Raising the amount of money we did and accomplishing this work in that period of time seemed insurmountable a year and a half ago.
Black bear cubs lose their moms from car crashes, starvation, hunting, or when TWRA euthanizes them after conflict. The Appalachian Bear Rescue has historically succeeded at rehabilitating cubs in a way that ensures similar survival rates to wild cubs. Greco says he hopes the new protocols will still give rescued cubs the best chance at a healthy life in the wild. Caroline Eggers, WPLN News.
For the fourth time in his tenure, Governor Bill Lee will swear in a Tennessee Supreme Court justice today. The investiture ceremony for Kyle Hickson will take place in Knoxville. That's where he's been serving as a judge on the Court of Criminal Appeals. Hickson's a member of the Federalist Society. Membership is often a prerequisite for appointments by Republican governors and presidents. He's 42 years old and will be the youngest of the court's 5 justices. Former State Senator Jim Tracy has died. Tracy represented the district around Shelbyville for more than a decade, starting in 2005. He later served with the U.S. Department of Agriculture under the first Trump administration. In remembrance, Lieutenant Governor Randy McNally called Tracy a steady hand, a devoted public servant, and a man of great integrity. Earlier this year, state lawmakers passed a resolution honoring Tracy, saying, quote, "We would do well to follow his example of courage and compassion in public service." The Tennessee Lookout reports Tracy died from cancer. He was 69 years old. You'll find more news anytime at WPLN.org. Myths and legends about bats are often negative, but in reality, their role in ecosystems includes critical agricultural services for humans. For the Appalachian Mid-South Newsroom, West Virginia Public Broadcasting's Eric Douglas reports bat populations have dropped significantly in the face of disease and a changing climate.
Bat activity starting around 8:30. First bat flying in and out at 8:37.
Cave bats typically don't live in easily accessible locations. Even when their home is within earshot of a paved road, getting to their front porch takes some work. Alex Silvas is the Endangered Species Coordinator for the West Virginia Division of Natural Resources in Elkins. He takes me to what he describes as the easiest location for a spring bat count. After a nearly vertical 75-yard hike up a hillside, we arrive at an undisclosed site to find Virginia big-eared bats.
So over the span of about an hour and a half, we're expecting to see around 1,200 bats come out of this cave.
The cave entrance is relatively small, no more than about 7 feet across and 2 feet high. Silvas explains that it goes much further back inside the mountain and opens up considerably.
There is a room in this cave that's about 800 feet long. You wouldn't know it by the size of this particular entrance, but essentially the whole of the side of this mountain is basically underlain by cave passage.
More than half of all bat species in North America are at risk of further population loss in the coming years.
One of the big problems facing bats is white nose syndrome, and that's now a national and international issue because it's in Canada and the United States. White nose syndrome has resulted in the deaths of over 99% of some of our different species of bats.
Bats also face threats from climate change as temperatures in the region rise.
The humidity and the temperature are both very important for the cave conditions for the bats. So they really want specific temperature and humidity ranges. And if you get outside of those, we don't have the bats.
The population loss has major implications for agriculture. There was a study some years ago that estimated that insect pest control provided by bats was worth over $8 billion. John Moordock is the hemp program coordinator for the West Virginia Department of Agriculture. He says bats prey on bugs that damage crops.
The fact that they could eat up to 1,000 moths in an evening, and then each female moth has the capability of laying thousands of eggs. More agricultural insect pests were found in agricultural fields that had no bats present.
And that comes at a cost, both as an expense for pesticides and the loss of crops. To help bat populations rebound, Moordock says preserving water quality is crucial.
If you want to conserve bats or bolster their population, is to have clean drinking water. Many pesticides can leach from the soil into your water.
I'll take us back to 4. There's 5 plus 2.
Counting bats is a bit of a challenge. For nearly 2 hours, Silvas tallies them in batches of 5 at a time.
5 bats out. We're actually on plus 2. That's 3, 4.
In total, Silvas logs more than 1,500 bats, up 150 from the same location last year. That's a good indicator for the health of this particular colony. But challenges from climate change, pesticides, and disease will continue putting bats at risk of further population loss in the coming years, and humans stand to lose more without them. For the Appalachian Mid-South Newsroom, I'm Eric Douglas in Franklin, West Virginia.
That report is part of a project involving reporters from across the Appalachian Mid-South Newsroom, looking at signal species in our region and what they can tell us about the state of the natural world in our part of the United States. Thanks for listening to the Nashville is Your Podcast. We take this look at news every weekday. If you like it, go ahead and subscribe on your favorite podcasting app and tell a friend or give us a mention on your socials. It really helps get the word out. And of course, everything at WPLN News is listener supported. You can become a member at WPLN.org. And that's it for today. Thanks so much for listening. Let's make this day a good one, and we'll catch back up tomorrow.